It's just me again this time, unfortunately, because IROCK and Adeleyi were both unavailable for commentary because I didn't ask them. That was a really interesting conversion, and it didn't work. So as we saw there, the Okizeme option for Yuyuko is to kind of dodge in and out of the tech out spot, as we saw IROCK go and tech out. After that, you use J44 to a J2A, and it will cross up, which means that you are going to be flying backwards while using a move that hits down. So you are crossing them from the up position, whereas a cross under would be crossing them from the under position. See last video talking about Iku's D22 or Apache's J88. That was a bad 2B situation there because Yukari's neutral is very bullet heavy in terms of her C bullets because they snipe very easily. I want to go back and I want to go back and eventually I want to count how many times IROCK does highs versus lows, because this is something I've heard him talk about before, is he'll count how many times an opponent will block high versus how many times they block low. I don't know if you saw, but last pressure he did 4A, 4A, and then 3A. That was blocked successfully by Adeleyi. The next time that he pressured, which was just now, he did 4A, 4A, well, he did dial A, so 5AAA, which is a high hit, which did result in a wrong block and forced a border escape out from Adeleyi. Again, we see the conversion into the 2 card here. This is actually kind of rough for IROCK right now. Now, even though Adeleyi won that round, we can still see the 2B being absolutely stifled by the J2C from IROCK there. It is a very difficult move to deal with, because it's a large, wide bullet that has good density. Here we see the pinwheel being used. That is really strong in Spring Haze, because Spring Haze, all melees turn grazable, but they turn into type 2 bullets, which means that they drain spirit upon graze. The thing about Yukari's pinwheel is it drains spirit like crazy if you graze it, which is why Adeleyi was dodging out, because she predicted that IROCK was going to go for the pinwheel. Because, God, you just want to. In Spring Haze, if you are Yukari, you just want to go for the pinwheel and see all the weather crystals come out. It's really satisfying. So now we saw, this is the next pressure. I'm not sure if I missed one here, but this is another one of IROCK's mix-ups. Now we see him, he used 2A 4 times and then 6A once into the pinwheel. Because, you know, you go into the pinwheel. It just works, okay? Pinwheel's broken. That was, I can't tell if that was really well timed by Adeleyi or poorly timed by IROCK, but basically that should be tight right there. The pinwheel into the round. By the way, pinwheel, that is a 623 input. That's the default one from Yukari. I know we have some beginner viewers here that might not know these terms, but basically the forward and then forward, down, forward skill input is called 623. I'll stick at the little notation thing here. Basically, it is the default skill that Yukari uses to kind of check and pressure, along with the 3-card Ran, which is what we see here in the bottom left. It's a little spinny thing that will cause a whole bunch of blocking and extend the pressure that IROCK wants to do. However, he didn't time it right, because that should be tight, as in you shouldn't be able to border escape there. Again, pinwheel's broken. So far, every single time I've seen IROCK go for a mix-up, it has been something different. This is terrifying. I usually am just on the receiving end of IROCK's pressure and it feels like, oh, it's time to lose. But looking at it closely, everything is different. Every single time he does something, it's like a random number generator. It's like he is truly varying his pressure at a very high level. That is Aurora Typhoon. The reason why that just kind of stopped mid-combo is because the Aurora turned into Typhoon, which means that nobody can block, which means that all combos immediately stop. That is pure luck. That is pure RNG. Aurora is a random weather. It is one of the few truly random elements in this game. And it's really unfortunate for Adeleey there. Though she was already kind of on death's door after that Ran, the Typhoon just seals the deal. Now, Typhoon's strategies here, as we see, Adeleey is going for C bullets, which do not interact with other bullets because they're ghosts. It's a kind of a weird interaction. It only happens with Yuyuko bullets. And IROCK is opting to graze these bullets and go for his C bullets. Again, he's sort of treating it like an infinite neutral, because ultimately for both of these two players, neither of them really wants to get close. I mean, of course, Adeleey wants to get close, but not that close. She doesn't want to deal with the consequences of getting that close, which is effectively Pinwheel. Pinwheel is really, really strong here as well, because it is a graze move that has a lot of hit stun on it, which means that you're going to be able to stop somebody. Because in Typhoon, while you can't block per se, hit stop isn't a thing. The thing that means that you can't combo after getting hit, that is removed. However, you can still be stunned by being hit, which is when you see kind of situations like if you get hit by a Yuyuko B bullet in Typhoon, you just kind of stop. You don't get hit per se, it doesn't interrupt any of your actions, but you are motionless. Pinwheel acts in a similar fashion, except it's also a graze move and it does a whole ton of damage. As we see, IROCK is actually baiting out Adeley's 2B there in neutral, which would have the same effect as a 5B because they're the same bullet fundamentally. They're just it's a different angle. What that means is the B bullet is going to have a bunch of that block stun, whereas if IROCK just dodges out and then uses C bullets instead, he's getting a significant advantage. As we can see, Adeley's already at 2/3 health. Now, the last part of Typhoon is, of course, as it's ending, you want to be the first person to get a hit in, because that's when, you know, block stop is a thing anymore. I might be confusing the two. Block stop versus block stun, because they're really ambiguous terms, because a stun assumes a stop, and a stop kind of assumes a stun. So block stop is probably the actual term for what's happening in Typhoon, but I don't think anybody can really fault me for confusing the terms there. That was optimal. There's no other way that she could have actually comboed off of that. I think maybe a couple more hits of J2A would have gotten it a little bit more optimal. As we can see, the limit here is 125%. If it were truly optimal, that would have been 135%. However, that is not the important part. The important part is that that was a lot of damage, and that was a very important conversion. That's something that Yuyuko mains should know about, is the whole J2A to J6A, J6C, sorry, J6C, J236B conversion. In mid-screen and like any time you hit like a J2A or a J6A, you can do that. J6A specifically, it's a little bit more ambiguous, but this was a very good conversion. That was something that you should have ingrained in your mind if you are a Yuyuko main. That was such a string of really weird frame data there. As we can see here, the 2A whiffs because the J2A actually pushes IROCK too far. After that, we see J6C being totally just barely hit out. Like if Adeleyi had just sat there and done nothing, IROCK would have gotten killed by the J6C. However, because she did go for some other thing, assuming that she was safe because she had the slow-moving bullet, she got hit by IROCK'S 3A, which barely worked. That was such a close thing there. Pinwheel, Spring Haze. I said it before, I'll say it again. That is something that you always want to do. It's like not even IROCK is immune to the absolute thrill, the absolute compulsion to use Pinwheel in Spring Haze. It's so good, it's so satisfying, and a player like Adeleyi is going to know that that is an extreme compulsion. It's like anybody, like Reimu and Sprinkle. When your 623, the default one, becomes a real DP, you want to use it. There are certain weathers that make you want to use things. And it leads to IROCK'S downfall here. Now, before we get into the second game, let's talk about matchups and what you want to do here as Yuyuko versus Yukari. Now, this is a matchup that has been shown many times here on this channel. But effectively, Yukari in neutral wants to snipe with C-bullets or otherwise snipe with long melees. In the sense of Yuyuko, she's got really like slow startup bullets that are quite indomitable. Like her default 236 is going to be very strong, however it gets kind of beaten by Yukari's C-bullets again. And her 2B is a really strong presence because it really dissuades any walk-up. But Yukari's C-bullets will outdense it, so you can get sniped out. We saw that happen a couple times earlier. It kind of all boils down to who gets a knockdown, and that can happen for many reasons. That's ultimately what neutral is who gets the knockdown. That's when neutral ends, is when somebody gets knocked down, and then it transfers to Okizeme and pressure and all that. It's just kind of who hits. If you get hit, then you lost neutral in this kind of matchup, especially versus a player like IROCK who knows how to convert from anything. Yuyuko, you might be more likely to just kind of get a slap on the wrist and be able to air attack out back into neutral, but there's just too much nuance to really explain it. Just watch games and see how people play. That is the best advice I can give you. If you're looking for matchup experience, watch matchups at a high level because those players know what they're doing. Far more than I do. That was the perfect example of the neutral strategy here. IROCK wanted to go for the C bullet for sniping. Yuyuko, Adeleyi wanted to go for the long startup C bullets, and it barely worked. That was a really well-timed graze, and she almost got hit by the C bullets, but didn't, which is great. wanna, let me just, I just wanna see that one more time. Yeah, that happened. Okay, moving on. Good air unblockable setup. If you get somebody to block your stuff, chances are they're going to continue blocking for a little bit, and all you need is a little bit if you're that close to the ground. As we saw, that air unblockable means that you can convert any kind of like air pressure. If you land, you can use one of your moves, like Adeleyi uses 4A here into the combo, the conversion into 2 card. That air unblockable setup is, it's another thing, like, it's like a conversion. You know to look for it. If you look for specific setups, you are going to find them. You're gonna be easier to, it's gonna be easier to react to them, basically. So now, Okizeme. We have talked about this a couple times before, but Okizeme is the concept of doing something to your opponent on wake up. Now, the application of this in this exact instance is that little glowy floaty thing we see over here. As we see, IROCK is about to throw another one here. This is the Alt 214 skill, Universe of Matter and Antimatter, I think. It's the Okizeme tool that Yukari has. First time you use it, it throws this little doohickey woo-wah thing, and the second time it throws another doohickey woo-wah thing. However, they will go and split the distance between each other and turn into a bullet that is standing there. You use this as Okizeme to create a hitbox that is going to be there when your opponent wakes up. It allows you to hit them with a bullet and a melee at the same time, as well as do chip damage and do spirit damage. By the way, every single skill in this game does chip damage. So if you feel like, oh my god, that was a melee, why didn't it do chip damage? That was me, before I learned that all skills do that. It's kind of weird. As we see, that turned into a cross-up, which was an excellent choice, because you want to instinctively block when you have that kind of a really terrifying wake up. If you have just this bullet hitbox that's sitting on you, and Yukari is also like within 2A range, you want to expect a 2A. However, IROCK used this opportunity to go for the J4-4 J5A, which crossed up. Very interesting Okizeme option, and it worked. He didn't convert though. I'm going to see that one more time. This is an example of a cross under. This is what happens if you go underneath your opponent and hit them in the direction behind you. It's the exact same concept of a cross up, but instead of up, you are under. I wish that it were called crossover or cross under, but cross up sounds better than crossover, and cross down is stupid. This is Clash of the Titans here, because we have two absolutely ridiculous moves with ridiculous hitbox and frames going up against each other. In this instance, we have Pinwheel B version, which is arguably the stronger version because it's got a better hitbox, it has better frame data. But you have this versus Yuyuko's J2A. And that in and of itself is just one of the most broken moves in this game, because it's just this big, fat bunch of spirit orbs that is just down and in front of you as Yuyuko. It's so impossible to beat that even Pinwheel manages to only trade with it. And this ends in both players getting knocked down, because while Pinwheel hits, and it seems like you can tech out, it kind of makes your gravity turn into like you're on Jupiter for a second, and you just fall to the ground. Like that. That was a really nice exchange here. So as we see, we have the dropped combo. This probably wasn't intentional, but IROCK really picked up well on it because he got kind of put into a state of distress after, you know, dropping the combo. As we all do, if you drop a combo, it feels bad, okay? You can kind of tell that it wasn't intentional by the way that he kind of just half-assed the J2A in pressure there. And he had to use Hangeki to maintain his pressure. I talked about this earlier in a different video, I don't remember. But basically, if you're in the corner and you're pressuring somebody, that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to use defensive moves. So if you want to maintain your status as being in pressure, using Hangeki is a totally reasonable option if your opponent is liable to mash. But that was just excellent pressure. I'm not keeping track, but so far that still felt different. That was a lot of 2A hits, more than I've seen before, and the restand, not that either. He went to the ground to continue the ground pressure, and it led to a crush. That was really nice. So something I haven't really talked about before is this alt 214 that Adeley is using. It's the Spirits That Died Well, and it is a really, really dense bullet. It is otherwise known as a laser. It's not like a laser in the sense that it's like going to hit just always, but it is a very, very dense bullet that is practically impossible to outdense. I believe she's using this instead of the default 214 because, well, one, she hates Bloom and thinks that it's unfair, which is, you know, that's fair. It's not, but using Spirits That Died Well will give her an option other than C bullets and other than B bullets in neutral. Because the default 214 is basically just a bunch of B bullets, so they're not really dense, but this really dense bullet will give some kind of way to combat the Yukari C bullets, as we see her trying to use it in neutral. It hasn't really shown much promise yet, but, you know, we hold out hope. I'm not sure if this specific thing would have converted into the 4 card, because usually if you hit a 236, the default 236 as Yuyuko, you can convert that into either 2 card Poison or 4 card Time Bomb. They're slightly different. 2 card Poison will reduce your hit points over time, similar to if you were in the air in Scorching Sun. By the way, it's almost Scorching Sun. That wasn't planned. And the 4 card Time Bomb is, well, it's a time bomb. It's the life ticket to the netherworld. It is 4 seconds and then it explodes. The only way to beat it is by backdashing, using a bomb, or hitting Yuyuko. Now, this is very interesting to me because we see both players are just kind of trying to mash, and they're both adapting to each other's wanting to mash. As we see, Adeley is going for the 2C there after pressure, and it works out really well because that brings her above any kind of foray, and it simultaneously creates a bullet which will corner carry if it hits, but not knock down. So it's a really effective way of getting IROCK pushed further into the corner. Doesn't work because IROCK just mashes anyway from a different standpoint. But, you know, good idea. This is very interesting. Adeley forced Typhoon. I don't know if I really agree with this one. So simply for the reason that IROCK is holding the 3 card. It's 1 card away from what he currently has on. It is a neutral winning card. I'm expecting him to use it right now. I think that was a misinput. That was such a good Typhoon from IROCK. Like, that was from almost like from that second J2A, that was like a done deal. He really almost won in Typhoon. That was really awkward. That must have been awkward. If he used that other 3 card, I guarantee you he would have won Typhoon there. That was really risky on Adeley's part. I am not sure why she did that. That seems kind of misinformed, and it only worked because of a mistake on IROCK'S part. Again, here we see the 4-card Time Bomb. I'm interested to see how IROCK wants to deal with this. There are a couple ways that Yukari actually can deal with this. One of them is backdashing in the corner. I don't know if you've done this as Yukari, but it'll transport you to the other side of the stage. It's not very useful in a lot of circumstances, but it works to deal with Time Bomb. And it didn't work. That's unfortunate. Now, that is another use for the Alt 214, is it's great for conversions. If you hit a J6A or a J8A, you can use the either B or C versions, I forget, of the spirits that died well, and it will lead to a very nice conversion for not a lot of spirit, like 1 orb. It's a skill cooldown, but if it's only 1 orb, it's still fine. Now, an interesting thing about River Mist here is that Yuyuko's moves and Yuyuko's conversions are very big. And we talked about this with Debomb last video, that using big moves is really beneficial in River Mist if your opponent doesn't have them, because it basically allows you to be the only one who uses conversions. Now, that's not entirely true. IROCK can convert, but it is much better for Yuyuko to be in River Mist. That conversion is really hard. If you've used J2C before, it's really fickle, and converting that into a J5A, J8A is just really impressive to me. Now, again, we have River Mist, and now you see why people don't like it. IROCK'S ADELEY dropped because River Mist forced the distance between both of them to be farther apart. Effectively, what River Mist does is it oscillates the distance between both players. That was really lucky. Adeley almost ran out of spirit there. Drizzle increases spell card damage, which is why you saw a 2-card hit for almost 3100 damage. Interesting choice of pressure here. Personally, after seeing that IROCK went to 1 orb, I would have gone for like a 6C, because it would have crushed. If somebody wrong blocks, they can't border escape, basically. So I think this was a little bit of a mistake. I know we can all kind of get into our heads during pressure, because if you expect that your opponent will have right blocked something, then it might be a good idea to just kind of stand back and see what they do. Because if they go for a mash, you might be able to capitalize on that. But if you go for a bullet and you do that on an autopilot and they right block, they could graze forward and punish you for it. As we see here, Adeley's autopilot was to kind of stay still and see what happens, and it led to not picking up on that crush. That is another instance of J2A versus Pinwheel, and another instance of it trading. And that's just funny to see. I think both players kind of expected the other player to air tech out there to prevent Typhoon, but then neither of them did. Because neither of them wanted to be the one knocked down in Diamond Dust, but they both wanted to be calm, so they both air teched out because they expected the other person to play and air tech out. But that was a really funny game of chicken. I think that was what happened there. I'm not sure though. And again, the weather sword here is used to both, it can force a weather and it can also force a weather away. So as you're going to see here, Typhoon is going down very rapidly. Diamond Dust, it means you can't tech anywhere. It means that you get hit by Okizeme. So it does two things. One of them, you can't tech, and you can't ground tech, which means that you can't roll out, you can't roll towards the wall, you can't do anything other than a neutral wake up, which is to just stand up. And this is really important because it means that you can be assured that your opponent is going to be right there when they wake up. So you can just know exactly where they are instead of having to guess one of three positions. It makes Okizeme a lot more easy. This is a very interesting form of pressure. So because the 6C here, it worked. The 6C was kind of sitting there and it staggered a little bit. That means that the 2 card there, that normally would have been minus on block, was backed up by that bullet. So you kind of just have to block, and yeah, he got crushed there. And it's still Diamond Dust. Pinwheel! Now, we saw there, that is an effective strategy for dealing with Time Bomb. If you teleport, you're invulnerable while you're teleporting, as Yukari. So not only does it work with the backdash in the corner, but it works on any of her default 4-2-1 skills. Pinwheel. Now the respect here that we saw from the 6-6B, which is minus, was that it was going to go into the Pinwheel, because IROCK has been Pinwheel happy so far. So Adeley expected that he was going to use Pinwheel. However, he didn't, because that's the pressure. That's IROCK's pressure. It's insane. So he went into another combo, and it worked. Pinwheel. Aha! Pinwheel. Finally, it actually got dodged. It's such an effective anti-air because it's so difficult to punish it. It might seem like the most punishable thing in the world because, you know, she's flying up into the air and then falling all the way back down, but she falls down so fast and there's not a lot of recovery. From this distance, yeah, it's punishable. As we see here, yeah, it got punished. But under most circumstances, that is very, very safe. It's a very safe move to just spam. Now, we saw a border escape here when it didn't seem like Adeleey was that much pressured. However, you have to account for the fact that Yuyuko Adeleey was almost out of spirit, and blocking those bullets would have led to a crush, which would have led to probably a knockdown. Because if you get crushed in the air, you can't air tech unless you take like one hit. At that point, it's fine. But if you are crushed in the air and no other damage befalls you, you will fall to the ground like a sack of potatoes. Again, IROCK'S pressure is fantastic. That also seemed different. I don't remember him doing 2A twice into 6A. I think I've seen him do it 4 times, but man, this guy's just got hella variations. We see River missed again, so we're now in neutral, and IROCK immediately backed off because any attempt at pressure was just going to end in him getting jabbed out by Adeleey, because Adeleey is the one with larger hitboxes consistently. Pinwheel, it grazes, by the way. It grazes bullets, which is another reason why it's so good and broken. Another good example of a cross under with Yuyuko's J8A. It's so fun for me to see that happen because it always is so satisfying to land a J8A. Especially when it's backwards. You can't really do much to follow up on it. Except for, you know, just throw out a C bullet. But it is still very, very satisfying to land. Yuyuko has this thing that she can do where she'll just kind of kill you, and that's what we saw there. This is the time and time again honored classic of dropping your combo and messing up your pressure, and then crouching because you're expecting the opponent to expect you to jump. It makes your hitbox smaller, and it will get rid of a whole lot of options that your opponent has for air to ground. You know, unless they're Aya. Or Suwako. Pinwheel! I'm sorry, this is probably getting annoying. The reason why Pinwheel is working so much is because Adeleey can't really afford to see it as this viable option. She just kind of has to try and block it correctly, because it does cross under as well. You're not really sure when it's going to affect you, because it's one of those moves that hits really kind of directly straight up, which means that it has any kind of variation from side to side of Yukari is going to lead to really noticeable change in how you have to block, because if she's to the left of you, then you have to hold right, and if she's to the right of you, you have to hold left. However, she's this big circle. She's a big circle, and I'm not even sure that the hitbox is like in the middle of that circle, so you just kind of have to guess. This is another application of Pinwheel that is utterly broken. It's one of these moves where you have to guess how many times it's going to hit you before you border escape, because if you don't guess right, well, you see what happens. You get hit. If you border escape off of the second hit and Yukari decides to hold for 3 hits before using Ran, then you just get hit and you get knocked down, and IROCK gets a free knockdown, and you never want IROCK to get a free knockdown. The other thing about Pinwheel is that it has like infinite untech, so anytime you get hit by it, you can be assured that you are going to fall to the ground like a bunch of rocks. This is kind of funny. So we see that IROCK is holding Ran. So what he's effectively doing is he is just going to keep using Pinwheel in pressure until Adeley Brawl blocks correctly, and then he's going to go into Ran for more pressure. It really sucks. This is such a bad situation to be in if you are Adeley right now. Another application of the 421, that's the teleport that IROCK was using, is it's air unblockable. It's a really big, long, meaty hitbox that is air unblockable, and you don't know where it's coming from, because she can choose to go on the ground, she can come from the sky, in 3 different directions. This is another tactic of dealing with Time Bomb, is to let yourself get knocked down for less damage than you would take, because the process of waking up, it still ticks down if you are on the ground. So if you do what IROCK did here and let yourself get comboed, then you will probably, maybe, sometimes, don't quote me on that, sometimes you will let the Time Bomb tick off while you are waking up and invulnerable. Anyways, this was a fantastic set. I have to admit, both of these players, they adapt so well to each other's strategies, so you end up seeing a really wide display of behaviors and really, really great exchanges between the two. Like, IROCK, him just spamming pinwheels and pressure was a very small part of what he was doing, because he started out game 1, like, kind of testing the waters and going for these varying strings of highs versus lows and seeing what stuck and what didn't. And then as the set goes on, he's kind of transferring to this more bullet-centric pressure, and at the end it's just pinwheels, and it's just pinwheels because the pinwheels just kept working, so he did them more. The adaptation was just insane.